Marcus Williams walked through the glass doors of First National Bank on a warm Tuesday afternoon. He wore a simple blue polo shirt and dark jeans. His black sneakers made soft sounds on the shiny marble floor. The bank was busy with the usual lunchtime crowd. People stood in lines waiting to see tellers or sat in chairs filling out forms. Marcus looked around the large room. The ceiling was high with bright lights. Tall windows let in sunlight from the street. Behind the teller counter, he could see 4 bank workers helping customers. 2 security cameras hung from the ceiling corners. Everything looked normal and peaceful. He reached into his jacket pocket and felt the thick brown envelope. Inside was $8,500 in cash. The money came from a special event he had organized 3 days ago. It was a community fundraiser for the local youth center. Kids in his neighborhood needed a safe place to go after school. They needed computers, sports equipment, and books. Marcus had spent weeks planning the event. He asked local businesses to donate items for an auction. He organized a barbecue dinner. Families came together on Saturday at the community center. Parents bought food and bid on auction items. Children played games and won small prizes. By the end of the day, they had raised more money than Marcus had hoped for. Now he needed to put the money in the youth center's bank account. The center's director, Mrs. Johnson, had asked him to make the deposit. She trusted Marcus completely. He had helped the community for many years. As a volunteer, he organized events, coached basketball, and mentored young people. Marcus joined the line behind an elderly woman counting coins in her purse. In front of her stood a young man in a business suit talking loudly on his phone. The line moved slowly. Marcus didn't mind waiting. He used the time to think about how the money would help local kids. The youth center needed new basketball hoops for the gym. The old ones were broken and rusty. They also wanted to buy tablets for kids to use for homework. Many children didn't have computers at home. The money would make a real difference in their lives. While he waited, Marcus watched the bank tellers working. They all wore professional clothes and name tags. They smiled at customers and spoke politely. The bank seemed well-run and efficient. Marcus had used this bank for 15 years. He had never had any problems here. Behind the counter, one teller caught his attention. She was a white woman with short brown hair. Her name tag said Sarah. She looked to be in her late 30s. Sarah was helping a customer with a complicated transaction. Marcus noticed she kept looking around the bank while she worked. Her eyes moved from customer to customer. She seemed nervous or worried about something. Marcus reached the front of the line. A teller with a friendly smile called him forward. But just as he stepped up, that teller's computer screen went blue. She apologized and said she needed to restart her system. She asked Marcus to wait a few minutes or go to another teller. Marcus looked around. Sarah was finishing with her customer. She didn't smile when she saw Marcus walking toward her window. Her face looked serious and unfriendly. Marcus wondered if she was having a bad day. He approached Sarah's window and set the envelope on the counter. The envelope was thick and heavy with all the cash inside. Marcus also pulled out his wallet to get his identification and bank card. "Good afternoon," Marcus said with a friendly smile. "I need to make a deposit to the youth center account." Sarah looked at Marcus without smiling back. Her eyes moved from his face to the envelope and back again. She didn't say hello or ask how she could help him. Instead, she stared at him with suspicious eyes. "What's in the envelope?" Sarah asked. Her voice was cold and unfriendly. Marcus was surprised by her tone. Bank tellers usually greeted customers politely. He wondered why Sarah seemed so unfriendly. Maybe she was new to the job and felt nervous. "It's cash for a deposit," Marcus explained calmly. "We had a fundraiser for the community youth center. I need to put this money in their account." Sarah's eyes narrowed. She looked at the envelope again. "How much cash?" she asked. $8,500, Marcus replied. He opened his wallet and took out his driver's license and bank card. "Here's my identification." Sarah didn't reach for the ID cards. Instead, she kept staring at Marcus with suspicious eyes. Her behavior was strange and rude. Other bank tellers were friendly and helpful with their customers. Sarah acted like Marcus was doing something wrong. "That's a lot of cash," Sarah said slowly. "Where exactly did this money come from?" Marcus felt confused by her questions. He had already explained about the fundraiser. Why was she asking again? He stayed patient and polite. Maybe she hadn't heard him clearly. As I mentioned, we organized a community fundraiser, Marcus said. Families came together to raise money for the youth center. We sold dinner tickets and held an auction. Everything was planned and organized properly. Sarah crossed her arms and frowned. She looked at Marcus like she didn't believe his story. Her behavior was becoming more and more strange. Marcus had never been treated this way at a bank before. Other customers were starting to notice the situation. The man behind Marcus was checking his watch and looking impatient. An elderly lady was trying to hear what was happening. Even other bank tellers were glancing over at Sarah's window. Marcus remained calm and professional. He had dealt with difficult situations many times before. In his line of work, staying calm was very important. He knew that getting angry or upset would only make things worse. "Would you like me to show you the receipt from the event?" Marcus offered. "I have paperwork that shows how we organized the fundraiser." Sarah shook her head quickly. "That's not enough," she said. "This seems very suspicious to me. I don't think I can process this deposit." Marcus felt a wave of shock and disappointment. He couldn't understand why Sarah was treating him this way. He was a regular customer at this bank. He had proper identification. The money was completely legal and legitimate. There was no reason for Sarah to refuse his deposit. Behind Marcus, the line was getting longer. People were starting to look annoyed about the delay. Some customers whispered to each other about what was happening. Marcus felt embarrassed that he was causing a scene, even though it wasn't his fault. He took a deep breath and tried one more time to reason with Sarah. The youth center was counting on this money. The children needed the programs and equipment this fundraiser would provide. Marcus couldn't let them down because of one difficult bank teller. Sarah Mitchell stared at the black man standing in front of her teller window. She had worked at First National Bank for 8 years. In that time, she had developed her own ideas about who looked trustworthy and who didn't. Looking at Marcus Williams, alarm bells went off in her head. The thick envelope of cash made her nervous. $8,500 was more money than most people deposited at one time. Sarah had seen drug dealers before. At least she thought she had. They always carried large amounts of cash in envelopes or bags. They told stories about where the money came from. They acted calm and friendly to hide their crimes. This man fit the pattern perfectly in Sarah's mind. He was a black man with a lot of cash. He told some story about a fundraiser. But Sarah didn't believe fundraisers raised that much money. Not in this neighborhood. She decided he was probably lying. Sarah looked at Marcus again. He wore casual clothes like he didn't have a real job. His polo shirt and jeans looked nice, but they weren't business clothes. Most honest people who deposited large amounts wore suits or uniforms. They looked professional and serious. This man looked too relaxed. "I need to see more identification," Sarah said firmly. "A driver's license isn't enough for this amount of money." Marcus reached into his wallet again. He pulled out a credit card and his bank debit card. "Here are my bank cards," he said politely. "I can also show you my account history on your computer system." Sarah barely looked at the cards. She had already made up her mind about Marcus. No amount of identification would change her opinion. She believed he was trying to deposit illegal money. Her job was to protect the bank from criminals. "These cards don't prove where the money came from," Sarah said. Her voice got louder. "Anyone can have bank cards. I need official paperwork that shows this money is legal." Marcus felt frustrated but kept his voice calm. "I understand your concern," he said. "I have the event program in my car. I can also give you the phone number for Mrs. Johnson. She's the youth center director. She can confirm everything I'm telling you." Sarah shook her head. "I'm not calling anyone," she said rudely. "If this money was legal, you would have brought all the right paperwork. Honest people come prepared." Other customers in line were getting restless. A woman behind Marcus cleared her throat loudly. A man checked his phone and sighed. The elderly lady who had been watching whispered to her friend about the delay. Marcus turned slightly and nodded apologetically to the people behind him. He felt embarrassed that Sarah was causing such a scene. He had never been treated this way at any bank before. Usually tellers were helpful and professional. Sarah noticed the other customers getting impatient. But instead of solving the problem quickly, she became more stubborn. She didn't want to look weak in front of everyone. If she backed down now, people might think she wasn't doing her job properly. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside," Sarah said loudly. "I cannot process this deposit without proper documentation. You'll need to come back when you have official receipts and tax forms." Marcus stayed where he was. Ma'am, I've been banking here for 15 years, he said quietly. My account is in good standing. I've never had any problems before. Could you please call your supervisor? Sarah's face turned red with anger. She didn't like being questioned by customers, especially this customer. In her mind, Marcus was a criminal trying to deposit drug money. He was also challenging her authority in front of other people. My supervisor is busy, Sarah snapped, and I don't need to call anyone. I'm perfectly capable of handling this myself. The answer is no. I will not process this deposit. At the next window, another teller named Mike was helping a customer. He couldn't help but overhear Sarah's loud voice. Mike glanced over and saw the situation developing. He knew Sarah had strong opinions about certain types of people. She had made comments before that made him uncomfortable. Mike wanted to help, but he was in the middle of a complicated transaction. His customer was an elderly man who needed help with multiple accounts. Mike couldn't leave his window right now. He hoped Sarah would calm down and handle things professionally. Marcus pulled out his cell phone. I'm going to call Mrs. Johnson right now, he said. She can speak with you directly and confirm that this money is from our fundraiser. Sarah's eyes got wide when she saw the phone. She had watched enough crime shows to know that criminals often called their partners when things went wrong. Maybe this man was calling for backup. Maybe he was warning other criminals that the bank was onto them. Put that phone away, Sarah said sharply. You're not calling anyone from inside this bank. Marcus stopped dialing and looked at Sarah with confusion. I'm just calling the youth center director, he said. She can verify everything I've told you. But Sarah wasn't listening anymore. In her mind, everything Marcus did looked suspicious. His calm behavior seemed fake. His willingness to make phone calls seemed threatening. His casual clothes seemed like a disguise. She had convinced herself that he was dangerous. I said put the phone away, Sarah repeated even louder. If you don't cooperate, I'll have to call security. The bank's security guard was an older man named Tom. He was helping someone at the ATM machine across the room. Tom heard Sarah's voice getting loud and looked over. He had worked security for 20 years. He could tell when situations were escalating. Tom started walking towards Sarah's window. He moved slowly and calmly. His job was to keep everyone safe and prevent problems from getting worse. As he walked, he tried to figure out what was happening. Other customers were now openly staring at Marcus and Sarah. Some people took out their phones to record what was happening. In today's world, everyone wanted to capture dramatic moments on video. Marcus put his phone back in his pocket. He didn't want to make the situation worse, but he also didn't understand why Sarah was treating him so badly. He had followed all the normal procedures for making a deposit. He had proper identification. His money was completely legal. Sarah felt satisfied that she had made Marcus put his phone away. In her mind, this proved she was right about him. Innocent people would have been happy to call someone to verify their story. Only criminals would give up so easily. The truth was that Marcus gave up because he respected authority and wanted to avoid conflict. He had been taught from a young age to stay calm in difficult situations. Getting angry or arguing would only make things worse. But Sarah saw his calm behavior as proof of guilt. She had made up her mind about Marcus from the moment he approached her window. Nothing he said or did would change her opinion. Her prejudice had completely clouded her judgment. Tom, the security guard, reached Sarah's teller window. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. After 20 years of security work, he had learned to read situations carefully. Most problems could be solved with calm conversation and patience. Is everything okay here? Tom asked in a gentle voice. He looked at both Sarah and Marcus with equal attention. Sarah pointed at Marcus with an accusing finger. This man is trying to deposit a suspicious amount of cash, she said loudly. He won't provide proper documentation. He also tried to use his phone to call someone. Tom looked at Marcus. The man seemed calm and respectful. He wasn't acting aggressive or threatening. Tom had dealt with many difficult customers over the years. This man didn't seem like trouble. Sir, could you tell me what's happening? Tom asked Marcus politely. Marcus felt relieved that someone was finally listening to him. I organized a fundraiser for our community youth center, he explained. We raised $8,500. I need to deposit it in the center's account. I have my identification and account information. Tom nodded. This sounded like a reasonable explanation. Community fundraisers happened all the time. Churches, schools, and youth centers often asked volunteers to make deposits for them. "Do you have any paperwork from the event?" Tom asked. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket. "I have the event program and some photos on my phone," he said. "I also have the contact information for the youth center director." Sarah interrupted angrily. "He's lying," she said. "Drug dealers always have fake stories about where their money comes from. They carry programs and fake business cards to trick people." Tom was surprised by Sarah's harsh words. He had never heard her speak so rudely about a customer before. Something seemed wrong with her attitude today. "Ma'am, let's stay calm," Tom said to Sarah. "Let me see what documentation the gentleman has." Marcus pulled out a folded paper from his pocket. It was the program from Saturday's fundraiser. The front page had a colorful picture of children playing basketball. The title read, "Community Unity Fundraiser for Riverside Youth Center." Tom looked at the program carefully. It listed the event activities, donor recognition, and organizer names. Marcus Williams was listed as the volunteer coordinator. Everything looked professional and legitimate. "This looks official to me," Tom said to Sarah. "I think we can process this deposit." But Sarah shook her head firmly. "Anyone can make fake papers on a computer," she insisted. "This doesn't prove anything. The money could still be from drug sales." Marcus felt his patience starting to wear thin. He had been polite and cooperative for 20 minutes. Sarah was treating him like a criminal for no reason. Other customers were staring and whispering about him. "Ma'am, I understand you want to be careful," Marcus said to Sarah. "But I've answered all your questions. I've shown you my identification and event documentation. What else do you need from me?" Sarah crossed her arms and glared at him. "I need you to leave this bank," she said coldly. "Come back when you have official tax receipts and bank statements that prove this money is legal." Tom felt uncomfortable with Sarah's demands. Banks didn't usually require tax receipts for cash deposits. Customers deposited cash from garage sales, birthday gifts, and small businesses every day. No one asked for tax forms. "Sarah, maybe we should call the branch manager," Tom suggested quietly. Sarah's face turned red. She didn't want her manager involved. Mr. Peterson might override her decision. He might make her process the deposit. Sarah was convinced she was protecting the bank from a criminal. "I don't need the manager," Sarah said stubbornly. "I can handle this myself. This man is suspicious and I won't help him deposit drug money." Marcus felt a shock of anger run through his body. Sarah had just accused him of being a drug dealer in front of everyone in the bank. Other customers were now openly staring and listening to every word. A young mother pulled her small child closer to her side. An elderly man stepped back from the line. People were starting to look at Marcus like he was dangerous. Sarah's accusations were destroying his reputation in front of the whole community. "I am not a drug dealer," Marcus said firmly but calmly. "I'm a respected member of this community. I volunteer my time to help children. Your accusations are completely wrong and hurtful." Sarah laughed in a mean way. "That's exactly what a drug dealer would say," she replied. "Criminals always claim to be good people when they get caught." Tom could see the situation was getting worse instead of better. Sarah was making serious accusations without any evidence. The customer was getting upset, which was completely understandable. "Sarah, I really think we should get Mr. Peterson," Tom said more firmly. But when Tom looked around for the branch manager, he saw that Mr. Peterson was in his office with the door closed. Through the glass window, Tom could see him on an important phone call. A customer sat across from his desk with a stack of papers. The manager looked very busy. Mike, the teller at the next window, had finished helping his customer. He walked over to see what was happening. Mike had worked with Sarah for 3 years. He knew she sometimes made quick judgments about people. "What's going on?" Mike asked quietly. "Sarah won't process a deposit for this gentleman," Tom explained. "She thinks the money is suspicious." Mike looked at Marcus and the fundraiser program. Everything seemed normal to him. He had processed many similar deposits from community events. "I can help you at my window," Mike offered to Marcus. But Sarah stepped between them. "No," she said loudly. "I already told this man we won't process his deposit. Don't interfere with my decision." Mike was surprised by Sarah's aggressive behavior. Tellers usually helped each other solve customer problems. They didn't block other tellers from helping customers. By now, the entire bank had noticed the commotion. Every customer was watching Sarah argue with Marcus. Some people took out their phones to record what was happening. Others whispered to each other about the drama. Marcus felt humiliated and frustrated. He was a respected community leader being treated like a criminal. Children he mentored might see this video online. Parents from the youth center might hear about this incident. "I would like to speak with your manager," Marcus said firmly. "This treatment is unacceptable." Sarah pointed toward Mr. Peterson's office. "He's busy with important customers," she said rudely. "Not people like you." Tom felt shocked by Sarah's words. Her comment was clearly disrespectful and possibly racist. Bank employees were trained to treat all customers equally and professionally. "Sarah, that's enough," Tom said sternly. "You need to apologize to this gentleman right now." But Sarah refused to back down. She was convinced she was right about Marcus. In her mind, she was a hero protecting the bank from criminals. She wouldn't apologize for doing her job correctly. Marcus realized that reasoning with Sarah was impossible. She had made up her mind about him based on prejudice and stereotypes. No amount of evidence would change her opinion. The situation had reached a breaking point. Sarah was making false accusations. Other customers were treating Marcus like a criminal. His reputation in the community was being damaged with every passing minute. Marcus made a decision. He would wait for the branch manager to finish his meeting. He would file a formal complaint about Sarah's behavior. He would make sure this never happened to another customer. But Sarah had already made a different decision. While everyone was focused on the argument, she had quietly reached under her counter. Her hand found the small button that would change everything. Sarah's finger pressed the silent alarm button under her counter. The button was designed for emergencies when bank robbers or dangerous criminals threatened employee safety. By pressing it, Sarah was telling the police that the bank was in immediate danger. Within seconds, a silent alert went out to the local police station. The computer system automatically sent Marcus's description and location to patrol cars in the area. The message said, "Silent alarm activated at First National Bank. Possible robbery in progress." Sarah felt satisfied with her decision. In her mind, she was protecting herself and her co-workers from a dangerous criminal. She believed Marcus was trying to deposit drug money. When he got angry about her refusal, she decided he might become violent. Marcus had no idea that police were already on their way. He stood patiently at Sarah's window, waiting for her to call the branch manager. He checked his watch and saw that his lunch break was almost over. He needed to get back to work soon. Tom, the security guard, noticed that Sarah seemed calmer suddenly. A few minutes ago, she had been arguing loudly with Marcus. Now she stood quietly behind her counter with a strange smile on her face. "Sarah, are you going to call Mr. Peterson?" Tom asked. Sarah shook her head. "That won't be necessary," she said mysteriously. "This situation will be resolved very soon." Tom felt confused by her words. How could the situation be resolved if the manager didn't get involved? Marcus was still waiting to make his deposit. The problem hadn't been solved at all. Mike the teller was also puzzled by Sarah's sudden change in behavior. She had been angry and confrontational. Now she seemed calm and confident. Something didn't feel right about the situation. "Marcus, why don't you come to my window?" Mike offered again. "I can help you make your deposit while we wait for the manager." But Sarah stepped forward quickly. "No one is processing that deposit," she said firmly. "The police will be here soon to handle this properly." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "The police?" he asked with confusion. "Why would you call the police?" Sarah smiled coldly. "Banks have security procedures," she said. "When someone tries to deposit suspicious money and becomes aggressive, we call for help." Marcus felt shock and disbelief. He had never been aggressive or threatening. He had remained calm and polite throughout the entire interaction. Sarah was lying about his behavior. "I haven't been aggressive," Marcus said firmly. "I've been patient and respectful. You're making false accusations about me." Tom nodded in agreement. "Sir, you've been very polite," he said to Marcus. "I don't understand why Sarah thinks police involvement is necessary." But Sarah ignored Tom's words. She was convinced that Marcus was a criminal. When the police arrived, they would see the large amount of cash. They would arrest Marcus for money laundering or drug dealing. Sarah would be praised for catching a criminal. Other customers in the bank were now openly listening to the conversation. An elderly woman gasped when she heard that police were coming. A young man started recording with his phone. Parents pulled their children away from the teller area. Marcus felt his heart racing. He was a law-abiding citizen who had never been in trouble with police. The idea of being investigated like a criminal was terrifying and humiliating. His reputation could be destroyed by false accusations. "Ma'am, I think there's been a serious misunderstanding," Marcus said to Sarah. "I'm not a criminal. I'm a community volunteer trying to help local children. Please call off the police before this gets out of hand." Sarah laughed meanly. "It's too late for that," she said. "They're already on their way. You should have thought about consequences before you tried to deposit drug money in my bank." Mike felt sick to his stomach. He realized that Sarah had called the police without talking to the branch manager first. This was completely against bank policy. Employees were supposed to get supervisor approval before involving law enforcement. "Sarah, did you get permission to call the police?" Mike asked quietly. Sarah's face turned red. She knew she had broken protocol, but she didn't care about rules when dealing with what she believed was a criminal situation. "I don't need permission to protect this bank," Sarah said defensively. "It's my job to stop criminals from using our services." Tom shook his head sadly. In 20 years of security work, he had never seen an employee behave so unprofessionally. Sarah was creating a dangerous situation based on her own prejudices and assumptions. Marcus realized he needed to call his own supervisor immediately. If police were coming to investigate him, his boss needed to know what was happening. He couldn't let false accusations damage his career. Marcus pulled out his cell phone to make the call. But Sarah saw the phone and panicked. In her mind, Marcus was calling his criminal partners to warn them about police involvement. "Put that phone away," Sarah shouted. "You're not allowed to make calls while under investigation." Marcus ignored her and started dialing. He had every right to contact his supervisor about this situation. Sarah had no authority to stop him from making phone calls. Sarah looked around frantically for help. The security guard was clearly on Marcus's side. Mike the teller was questioning her decisions. Other employees were staring at her with confused expressions. Through the bank's large windows, Sarah saw 2 police cars pulling into the parking lot. Their lights were flashing, but their sirens were off. The officers were responding to what they thought was a bank robbery or armed threat. "The police are here," Sarah announced loudly. "Everyone stay calm and let them handle this criminal." Marcus looked toward the windows and saw the patrol cars. His heart sank as he realized how serious this situation had become. Police officers were coming to arrest him based on Sarah's false accusations. Other customers in the bank started moving toward the exits. Parents grabbed their children and headed for the doors. Elderly people looked frightened and confused. The peaceful bank had suddenly become a scene of chaos and fear. Tom tried to restore order. "Everyone, please remain calm," he announced. "There's no danger to customers. This is just a misunderstanding that will be resolved quickly." But people were too scared to listen. They had heard Sarah accusing Marcus of being a drug dealer. They had seen police cars arriving with flashing lights. Many customers assumed there was real danger in the bank. Marcus stood frozen at Sarah's window. In a few moments, police officers would walk through the bank doors. They would approach him as a suspected criminal. His life was about to change dramatically because of one person's prejudice and hatred. He thought about the children at the youth center who were waiting for their new basketball hoops. He thought about Mrs. Johnson, who trusted him to make this deposit safely. He thought about his own reputation and career that could be destroyed by false accusations. The police car doors slammed shut in the parking lot. Heavy footsteps approached the bank entrance. Sarah smiled with satisfaction as she prepared to watch Marcus get arrested. But she had no idea that her decision to call police would soon backfire in the most shocking way possible. The glass doors of First National Bank opened with a loud whoosh. 2 police officers walked inside with serious expressions on their faces. They wore dark blue uniforms and heavy utility belts. Their hands rested near their weapons as they looked around the bank for signs of danger. Officer David Johnson was a tall black man with 15 years of police experience. He had responded to hundreds of bank calls during his career. Most were false alarms or minor disputes, but every call had to be treated as potentially dangerous. Officer Maria Rodriguez was a shorter Latina woman who had been on the force for 8 years. She was known for her calm approach to difficult situations. She believed in talking through problems before taking any serious action. Both officers had received the silent alarm call while patrolling downtown. The dispatcher told them there was a possible robbery or threat at First National Bank. They expected to find armed criminals or hostages when they arrived. Instead, they saw a normal-looking bank with customers and employees going about their business. No one was lying on the floor. No one was shouting or running. The scene looked peaceful and safe. Officer Johnson scanned the room carefully. His trained eyes looked for anything unusual or threatening. He saw an elderly woman sitting in a chair filling out forms. A young mother was helping her toddler with a coloring book. Several people stood in teller lines conducting normal business. "Excuse me," Officer Johnson called out to the room. "We received an emergency call from this location. Is everyone okay here?" Tom, the security guard, walked quickly toward the officers. He looked relieved to see them, but also worried about the situation he was about to explain. "Officers, thank you for coming," Tom said quietly. "I think there might be a misunderstanding here. One of our tellers called for help, but I'm not sure it was necessary." Officer Rodriguez looked around the bank again. Everything seemed normal and calm. She had been expecting to find a robbery in progress or someone threatening employees. "What exactly happened?" Officer Rodriguez asked Tom. Before Tom could answer, Sarah rushed out from behind her teller counter. She pointed directly at Marcus, who was still standing near her window with the envelope of money in his hands. "That's him," Sarah said loudly. "That's the man I called about. He's trying to deposit a large amount of suspicious cash. I think it's drug money." Both officers turned to look at Marcus. He was a well-dressed black man in his mid-40s. He wore a clean polo shirt and nice jeans. He held an envelope and some papers in his hands. He looked calm and professional, not threatening or dangerous. Officer Johnson studied Marcus's face carefully. Something about the man seemed familiar, but he couldn't quite place where he had seen him before. The face was definitely familiar, but Marcus was dressed in casual clothes instead of his usual work attire. Marcus saw the officers looking at him and felt his stomach tighten with anxiety. He had never been investigated by police before. Even though he knew he was innocent, the situation felt scary and overwhelming. "Officers, there's been a misunderstanding," Marcus said calmly. "I'm trying to make a legitimate deposit for a community youth center. I have identification and documentation to prove everything I've told them." Officer Rodriguez appreciated Marcus's calm and respectful tone. In her experience, guilty people usually acted nervous or aggressive when confronted by police. This man seemed confident and cooperative. "Sir, could you please step over here so we can talk privately?" Officer Rodriguez asked politely. Marcus nodded and walked toward the officers. He moved slowly and kept his hands visible at all times. He knew that sudden movements could be misinterpreted as threatening. Sarah followed behind them, still pointing at Marcus accusingly. "He's been acting suspicious from the moment he walked in," she told the officers. "He has $8,000 in cash and won't explain where it came from." Officer Johnson looked at Sarah with confusion. "Ma'am, did he threaten you or anyone else in the bank?" Sarah hesitated for a moment. Marcus had never threatened her or anyone else. He had been polite and patient throughout their entire interaction. But Sarah was convinced he was dangerous. "Well, no," Sarah admitted, "but he got angry when I refused to process his deposit. And he tried to use his phone to call someone. That seemed suspicious to me." Officer Rodriguez was starting to understand the situation. This sounded like a customer service dispute, not a criminal investigation. The teller had apparently overreacted to a normal banking transaction. "Sir, could I see your identification, please?" Officer Rodriguez asked Marcus politely. Marcus reached slowly into his wallet and pulled out his driver's license. He handed it to Officer Rodriguez with steady hands. His heart was beating fast, but he tried to stay calm and cooperative. Officer Rodriguez looked at the license carefully. The name was Marcus Williams. The address was in a nice neighborhood across town. The photo matched the man standing in front of her. Everything looked legitimate and normal. Officer Johnson was still studying Marcus's face. The feeling of familiarity was getting stronger. He was sure he had seen this man before, but he couldn't remember where or when. "Mr. Williams, could you tell us what happened here today?" Officer Rodriguez asked. Marcus took a deep breath and began explaining the situation. He told them about the community fundraiser for the youth center. He explained how he had volunteered to make the deposit for Mrs. Johnson. He showed them the event program and offered to let them call the youth center director. As Marcus spoke, Officer Johnson listened carefully to his voice. Something about the way Marcus spoke was very familiar. The tone was calm and authoritative. It reminded Officer Johnson of someone he knew well. "What kind of work do you do, Mr. Williams?" Officer Johnson asked. Marcus hesitated for a moment. He usually didn't talk about his job when he was volunteering in the community. He preferred to be seen as just another neighbor helping out. But now his job might help explain why he was trustworthy. "I work in law enforcement," Marcus said simply. Officer Johnson felt a shock of recognition run through his body. Suddenly he remembered where he had seen Marcus's face before. It was in the police station. Marcus's photo hung on the wall in the main hallway. Officer Rodriguez was also starting to realize something important. She looked more carefully at the driver's license in her hands. The address was familiar. She had driven past that house many times on patrol. "Mr. Williams," Officer Johnson said slowly, "what exactly is your position in law enforcement?" Marcus looked at both officers carefully. He could see recognition dawning in their eyes. The situation was about to change dramatically. "I'm the chief of police," Marcus said quietly. The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Officer Johnson felt his face turn pale. Officer Rodriguez nearly dropped the driver's license. They had just responded to investigate their own boss based on a racist complaint from a bank teller. Sarah, who had been standing nearby listening to the conversation, felt her legs go weak. The blood drained from her face as she realized what she had just done. She had called the police on the chief of police himself. Officer Johnson felt like the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. He stared at Marcus Williams in complete shock and disbelief. This was his boss, the man who ran the entire police department. This was the chief of police standing in a bank being investigated like a common criminal. Officer Rodriguez looked down at the driver's license in her trembling hands. She read the name again, Marcus Williams. The address matched the house where she knew the police chief lived. There was no mistake. They had just responded to a call about their own boss. "Chief Williams," Officer Johnson said in a voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, I am so sorry." "We had no idea." Marcus looked at both officers with understanding and patience. He could see the shock and embarrassment in their faces. He knew this wasn't their fault. They had simply responded to a call like they were trained to do. "It's okay, officers," Marcus said calmly. "You were doing your job. You responded to a call and investigated professionally. I appreciate your service." But Officer Rodriguez felt sick to her stomach. She realized what had really happened here. A racist bank teller had called police on a black man for no reason other than the color of his skin. The fact that the man was their police chief made the situation even more horrifying. Sarah stood frozen behind them, listening to every word. Her face had turned completely white. Her hands shook as the full reality of her actions hit her like a truck. She had racially profiled the chief of police. She had called his own officers to arrest him. Other people in the bank were starting to realize what was happening. Customers whispered to each other as they recognized the police chief's name. Bank employees looked at Sarah with shock and disgust. Everyone understood that a terrible mistake had been made. Officer Johnson felt angry at Sarah for putting him in this position. He had been tricked into investigating his own boss based on racial prejudice. His reputation and career could be damaged by this incident. "Chief, what would you like us to do?" Officer Johnson asked quietly. Marcus thought carefully about his answer. He was hurt and angry about what had happened, but he was also a professional who understood that this situation needed to be handled properly. Getting revenge on Sarah wouldn't solve anything. "First, let's finish the business I came here to do," Marcus said. "I still need to make this deposit for the youth center." Officer Rodriguez nodded quickly. "Of course, sir. We'll make sure the bank processes your transaction immediately." Marcus turned toward Sarah, who was still standing nearby looking terrified. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking. She looked like she might faint at any moment. "Ma'am," Marcus said to Sarah in a calm but firm voice, "I believe you owe me an apology." Sarah opened her mouth, but no words came out. She tried to speak but could only make small gasping sounds. The magnitude of her mistake was overwhelming. She had destroyed her own career in a single afternoon. Tom, the security guard, stepped forward. He felt ashamed that he hadn't done more to stop Sarah's behavior. He should have insisted on calling the branch manager earlier. "Chief Williams, I apologize for this entire situation," Tom said sincerely. "I should have intervened more forcefully when I saw what was happening." Marcus nodded appreciatively. "Tom, you tried to help. I saw you attempting to de-escalate the situation. Thank you for that." Mike the teller also approached the group. He felt guilty for not standing up to Sarah more strongly. He had known her behavior was wrong, but he hadn't been brave enough to stop it. "Sir, I'm truly sorry," Mike said to Marcus. I offered to help you at my window, but I should have done more to prevent this from happening. Marcus looked around the bank at all the faces staring at him. Some people looked curious. Others looked embarrassed. A few customers were still recording with their phones. He realized this incident would probably be on social media within hours. Officer Rodriguez was thinking about the paperwork she would have to file about this incident. How do you write a report about racially profiling your own police chief? How do you explain that a bank teller wasted police time and resources because of her own prejudice? Chief, do you want to press charges against the teller? Officer Rodriguez asked quietly. Marcus looked at Sarah, who was still standing frozen with terror. He could have her arrested for filing a false police report. He could sue the bank for discrimination. He could destroy her life the same way she had tried to destroy his. But Marcus was a leader who believed in education over punishment. He wanted this incident to become a learning experience, not just a revenge story. No charges, Marcus said firmly. But I do want to speak with the bank manager about preventing this from happening to other customers. Sarah finally found her voice. Chief Williams, she said in a shaky whisper, I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. I don't know what came over me. Marcus looked at her carefully. He could see genuine remorse in her eyes, but he also knew that her apology came only after she learned who he was. She hadn't apologized when she thought he was just a regular community member. Ma'am, the problem isn't that you made a mistake, Marcus said seriously. The problem is that you treated me badly because of the color of my skin. You made assumptions about me that had nothing to do with my behavior or character. Sarah started crying as the truth of his words hit her. She had been racist and everyone in the bank knew it. Her prejudice had been exposed in the most humiliating way possible. Officer Johnson was thinking about all the times he had worked with Chief Williams. The chief was known for his fairness and professionalism. He treated all officers with respect regardless of their race or background. He was a good man who didn't deserve this treatment. Chief, is there anything else we can do for you? Officer Johnson asked. Marcus looked at both officers with appreciation. They had handled a difficult situation with professionalism and respect. Even after learning who he was, they continued to treat him with dignity. Just make sure this incident is documented properly, Marcus said. We need to learn from what happened here today. Officer Rodriguez nodded. Yes, sir. We'll file a complete report. Through the bank's windows, Marcus could see more police cars arriving in the parking lot. Word was spreading quickly through the police department about what had happened. Soon the entire force would know that their chief had been racially profiled. Marcus realized that this incident would follow him for the rest of his career. Every time people talked about him, they would remember the day he was treated like a criminal in a bank. But maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. If this happened to him as the chief of police, what happened to regular citizens who didn't have his authority and status? How many other people were treated badly because of their race? This incident could become a powerful teaching tool. The bank manager's office door finally opened. Mr. Peterson stepped out looking confused by all the commotion in his bank. He saw police officers, crowds of people, and his employee Sarah crying behind the teller counter. What's going on out here? Mr. Peterson asked with concern. Officer Johnson looked at Chief Williams, waiting for permission to explain the situation. This conversation was going to be very uncomfortable for everyone involved. Mr. Peterson, the bank manager, looked around his lobby with growing alarm. Police officers stood near the teller counter. Customers whispered and pointed at Sarah, who was crying behind her window. Tom, the security guard, looked upset and embarrassed. Someone please tell me what's happening, Mr. Peterson said firmly. As the bank manager, he needed to understand any situation involving police in his building. Officer Johnson stepped forward respectfully. Sir, we responded to a silent alarm call from this location. One of your employees reported a suspicious customer trying to make a large cash deposit. Mr. Peterson looked confused. Silent alarms were only used for robberies or serious threats. He couldn't understand why Sarah would activate one for a routine deposit. Where is this suspicious customer? Mr. Peterson asked, looking around the lobby. Officer Rodriguez gestured toward Marcus, who was standing calmly near Sarah's window. This is Mr. Marcus Williams, she said carefully. He was trying to deposit money for a community youth center. Mr. Peterson looked at Marcus and saw a well-dressed, professional-looking man. Nothing about him seemed suspicious or threatening. The manager felt even more confused about why police had been called. I don't understand, Mr. Peterson said. What was suspicious about a routine deposit? Marcus stepped forward to introduce himself properly. Mr. Peterson, I'm Marcus Williams, Chief of Police for this city. I came here to make a legitimate deposit, but your employee refused to serve me and called police instead. Mr. Peterson felt his blood turn to ice. The Chief of Police was standing in his bank after being treated like a criminal by one of his employees. This was the worst possible situation he could imagine. Chief Williams, Mr. Peterson said with shock and horror, I am deeply sorry. There must be some terrible misunderstanding. Sarah was still crying behind her counter, but she forced herself to speak up. Mr. Peterson, I thought he was depositing drug money. He had $8,000 in cash and couldn't prove where it came from. Mr. Peterson turned to look at Sarah with disbelief. You called police on a customer for making a cash deposit? Without checking with me first? Sarah's face crumpled as she realized how bad her decision sounded when spoken out loud. I was trying to protect the bank, she said weakly. Officer Johnson felt obligated to defend his chief. Sir, Chief Williams provided proper identification and documentation. He explained the money came from a community fundraiser. He was completely cooperative and professional. Mr. Peterson felt sick to his stomach. One of his employees had racially profiled the chief of police and wasted police resources. The bank's reputation could be destroyed by this incident. Chief Williams, please accept my sincere apologies, Mr. Peterson said earnestly. This behavior does not represent our bank's values or policies. Marcus nodded but remained serious. Mr. Peterson, I appreciate your apology. But this isn't just about me. How many other customers have been treated this way? How many people have been discriminated against in your bank? The question hung in the air like a dark cloud. Mr. Peterson realized that if this happened to the chief of police, it probably happened to regular citizens too. Other people just didn't have the authority to demand better treatment. Tom, the security guard, stepped forward. Mr. Peterson, I tried to intervene when I saw what was happening. But Sarah refused to listen to reason. She was determined to treat Chief Williams like a criminal. Mike, the teller, also spoke up. I offered to help Chief Williams at my window, but Sarah blocked me. She said no one should process his deposit. Mr. Peterson looked at Sarah with growing anger and disappointment. Not only had she embarrassed the bank, she had also ignored other employees who tried to help fix the situation. Sarah, you're suspended immediately pending a full investigation, Mr. Peterson announced. Please gather your personal items and leave the building. Sarah's face turned even whiter. She had expected to be disciplined, but she hadn't expected to be suspended on the spot. Her career at the bank was probably over. Mr. Peterson, please, Sarah begged. I made a mistake, but I was trying to do my job. I thought I was protecting the bank from criminals. Officer Rodriguez felt disgusted by Sarah's continued excuses. Ma'am, you didn't call police because of the money. You called because of his race. That's not protecting the bank, that's discrimination. Sarah knew Officer Rodriguez was right, but she couldn't admit it out loud. Admitting racial bias would make everything worse. But everyone in the bank already knew the truth about her motivations. Mr. Peterson turned back to Marcus. Chief Williams, how can we make this right? What can the bank do to address what happened here today? Marcus had been thinking about this question since the officers arrived. He wanted real change, not just empty apologies and promises. I want mandatory bias training for all employees, Marcus said firmly. I want clear policies about when police should be called. And I want regular community outreach to rebuild trust with customers. Mr. Peterson nodded eagerly. Absolutely. We'll implement all of those changes immediately, and I want to personally oversee Sarah's replacement to ensure this never happens again. Sarah gathered her purse and jacket from behind the counter. Other employees watched her with a mixture of pity and disgust. Some had always suspected she had racist attitudes, but now everyone knew for certain. As Sarah walked toward the exit, she passed by Marcus one last time. She stopped and looked at him with tears in her eyes. Chief Williams, I really am sorry, she said quietly. I know you probably don't believe me, but I never meant for this to happen. Marcus looked at her thoughtfully. He could see genuine remorse in her expression, but he also knew her sorrow came mainly from getting caught and facing consequences. Sarah, I believe you're sorry about the consequences, Marcus said honestly. But are you sorry about your assumptions? Are you sorry about how you treated me before you knew who I was? Sarah couldn't answer the question honestly. She was sorry about losing her job and embarrassing herself, but deep down, She still believed she had been right to be suspicious of a black man with a large amount of cash. "I need to think about that," Sarah said finally, which was the most honest thing she had said all day. Marcus nodded. "I hope you do think about it, and I hope you learn something from this experience." Sarah walked out of the bank with her head hanging in shame. Several customers in the lobby watched her leave. Some took photos and videos of her departure. Her humiliation was complete and public. Mr. Peterson turned his attention back to Marcus. "Chief Williams, can we please process your deposit now? And is there anything else the bank can do for you today?" Marcus smiled for the first time since entering the bank. "Yes, let's get this money deposited. The youth center has been waiting long enough for their fundraiser proceeds." Mike the teller quickly processed the deposit without any problems. The transaction took less than 5 minutes once someone was willing to treat Marcus with basic respect and professionalism. As Marcus prepared to leave the bank, Officer Johnson approached him privately. "Chief, I want you to know that I'm ashamed this happened to you. But I'm also proud of how you handled it." Marcus put his hand on the young officer's shoulder. "David, this wasn't your fault. You and Maria responded professionally to a call. That's exactly what you should have done." Officer Rodriguez also came over to speak with Marcus. "Sir, this incident is going to be talked about throughout the department. How do you want us to handle questions from other officers?" Marcus thought about her question carefully. He could try to keep the incident quiet to avoid embarrassment, or he could use it as a teaching opportunity for his entire police force. "Let people talk about it," Marcus said finally. "This is a chance for everyone to learn about the reality of racial bias. If it happened to me, imagine what regular citizens experience." Both officers nodded with understanding. They realized this incident would make them more aware of discrimination in their own community. It would change how they responded to similar calls in the future. Marcus walked toward the bank exit, followed by the respectful attention of everyone in the lobby. Some customers approached to apologize for Sarah's behavior. Others simply nodded with respect as he passed. As he reached the door, Marcus turned back to look at the bank one last time. This place would always remind him of a painful experience, but it would also remind him of an opportunity to make positive change in his community. 3 weeks later, Marcus Williams stood at the podium in the Riverside Community Center. The same room where the fundraiser had taken place was now filled with bank employees, police officers, and community members. Today was the first mandatory bias awareness training session that he had requested from First National Bank. The youth center had received their money and already started buying new basketball equipment. Children were using the computers that the fundraiser had made possible. The positive impact of that day's events continued to grow throughout the community. Mr. Peterson sat in the front row with his entire staff. He had taken Marcus's suggestions seriously and implemented major changes at the bank. New policies clearly outlined when police should be contacted. Every employee had to complete bias training before they could work with customers. Marcus looked out at the audience and saw faces of all colors and backgrounds. Bank tellers sat next to police officers. Community leaders sat with local business owners. Everyone had come together to learn from what had happened. 3 weeks ago, I experienced something that no person should ever face. Marcus began. I was treated like a criminal simply because of the color of my skin. But today I want to talk about how we can turn that negative experience into positive change. Sarah Mitchell was not in the audience. After leaving the bank, she had struggled to find another job. Word of the incident had spread quickly through the local business community. Employers were reluctant to hire someone known for discriminating against customers. Sarah had spent the past 3 weeks thinking about Marcus's question. Was she sorry about her assumptions or just sorry about the consequences? The honest answer was uncomfortable but necessary for her personal growth. She had enrolled in counseling to address her racial biases. She was reading books about discrimination and unconscious prejudice. For the first time in her life, she was seriously examining her own attitudes and behaviors. Sarah watched the training session online from her apartment. She listened carefully as Marcus spoke about the impact of racial profiling on individuals and communities. His words were firm but not angry. He focused on education rather than revenge. At the bank training session, Marcus shared statistics about discrimination in financial services. He explained how bias affects people's ability to buy homes, start businesses, and build wealth. He helped people understand that Sarah's behavior was part of a much larger problem. When someone is treated unfairly because of their race, it doesn't just hurt that individual, Marcus explained. It damages trust between communities and institutions. It makes everyone less safe and less prosperous. Officer Johnson and Officer Rodriguez were also in the audience. They had used the incident as a learning opportunity within the police department. They now questioned whether other calls they received might be based on racial bias rather than legitimate concerns. The police department had started tracking data about calls involving racial profiling. They were training officers to recognize when complaints might be motivated by prejudice. They were working to rebuild trust with communities that had been harmed by discriminatory policing. Tom, the security guard, had become an advocate for better training in his industry. He was working with other security companies to develop programs that help guards recognize and prevent discrimination. He never wanted to see another situation like the one at the bank. Mike, the teller, had been promoted to assistant manager at the bank. Mr. Peterson wanted employees who were willing to stand up for what was right. Even in difficult situations, Mike was helping to create a culture where discrimination would not be tolerated. Marcus continued his presentation by sharing stories from other community members who had faced similar discrimination. An elderly Latino man talked about being followed around stores. A young black woman described being questioned about her identity when using credit cards. These experiences happen every day in our community, Marcus said. Most people don't have the authority or platform that I have. They suffer in silence or simply avoid businesses that treat them poorly. The training session included interactive exercises that helped participants recognize their own unconscious biases. People learned about the difference between conscious racism and unconscious prejudice. They practiced responding appropriately to discriminatory behavior when they witnessed it. Mr. Peterson spoke during the session about the changes at his bank. "We failed, Chief Williams, and our community," he said honestly, "but we're committed to doing better. We've changed our policies, our training, and our culture." The bank had also started a community outreach program. They were partnering with local organizations to provide financial education and services to underserved neighborhoods. They were working to repair the trust that had been damaged by years of discriminatory practices. After the formal training session, Marcus stayed to answer questions from attendees. Many people thanked him for turning a painful experience into an opportunity for community growth. Others shared their own stories and asked for advice about addressing discrimination. A young bank teller approached Marcus nervously. "Chief Williams, what should I do if I see a coworker treating a customer unfairly?" she asked. Marcus smiled at her thoughtful question. "Speak up immediately," he said. "Don't wait for supervisors or managers. Every employee has a responsibility to ensure fair treatment for all customers." An elderly community member asked Marcus if he was angry about what had happened. "I was hurt and frustrated," Marcus answered honestly. "But anger alone doesn't solve problems. Action solves problems. Education solves problems. Working together solves problems." As the evening ended, Marcus reflected on how the incident had changed his own perspective. He had always known that racial discrimination existed, but experiencing it personally had deepened his understanding of its impact. The incident had also strengthened his commitment to community policing and building bridges between law enforcement and the people they served. He realized that his own officers needed better training about recognizing and preventing racial bias. 6 months later, the changes in the community were visible and measurable. The bank had processed more deposits from community organizations without any discriminatory incidents. Police calls based on racial profiling had decreased significantly. The youth center was thriving with its new equipment and programs. Children who had benefited from the fundraiser wrote thank you letters to Marcus and the community members who had supported them. Sarah Mitchell eventually found a job at a nonprofit organization that helped people overcome addiction and rebuild their lives. Her own experience with consequences and redemption had given her empathy for others who had made serious mistakes. She never forgot the lesson she learned from Marcus Williams. She became an advocate for second chances, while also taking responsibility for the harm her actions had caused. She often spoke at diversity training sessions about the importance of examining one's own biases. Marcus kept the fundraiser program from that day as a reminder of how one negative experience had been transformed into positive community change. He continued to volunteer with the youth center and organized annual fundraising events. The incident at the bank became a case study used in diversity training programs across the region. Marcus often told the story at conferences and workshops, always emphasizing the importance of education over punishment in addressing racial bias. Real change happens when people are willing to examine their own hearts and minds, Marcus would say. It happens when communities come together to address problems honestly and work toward solutions. The legacy of that difficult day at First National Bank lived on in the improved policies, better training, and stronger community relationships that had grown from it. Marcus had proven that even painful experiences could become catalysts for positive transformation when handled with wisdom, patience, and hope.